Welcome to our first recording, our first episode of the Nameless podcast. We're working on that, but it's going to cover recruiting stories. It's going to cover player profiles and development stories, as well as just overall educational pieces that we think would be beneficial for you guys to learn about from us. So to start, I'm basically going to give you a brief background on myself, what my playing career was like, and how I got to where I am now. So I am 30 years old. I am the co-founder of East Coast Evolution with Logan Carmen. I grew up in Exeter, New Hampshire, went to Exeter High School, was a graduate in 2010. I then went on to play baseball at University of Connecticut, where I was drafted by the Pirates and then the Cardinals. Ultimately played 2 years in the minor leagues before being released. Took a desk job doing some cold call sales and transitioned into coaching pretty quick after that. Ended up working in professional baseball for 3 years with the Milwaukee Brewers. And then in the fall of 2021, decided to step away from professional coaching and focus full-time on running the business. And so here we are today. I'm gonna give you a little bit of a story about my recruiting profile or my recruiting trail, whatever we want to call it. But I think there's a lot to learn about what my experience was like, and then transition a little bit into kind of what the landscape of recruiting looks like today. So if we flash back to 2008, I was a junior in high school. I think I had a pretty good season on the mound for my high school team. I was an all-state pitcher. Was really starting to kind of come into myself as a baseball player at that point in time. So prior to that, my first love was skiing. Wanted to be a professional skier from 10 to 15 until I realized that probably wasn't in the cards. And after that, I wanted to play football in college. So I had this dead set goal from like 6th grade on that I wanted to play football at Stanford or Virginia Tech. And transitioned to played football in high school, was pretty good, got recruited by some 1AA schools, thought about going to play at like University of Maine, University of New Hampshire, until the summer after my junior year in high school. That's when I was actually invited to area code tryouts. I get invited to area code tryouts. If you don't know what area code is, it's essentially teams from different regions across the country. It's invite-only tryout, and then it's the top, essentially 25 kids from each region. They go to play against each other in California for a week in front of about every single major league team, every GM, anyone who's anyone in professional baseball is scouting those games. So I am a 17-year-old kid from New Hampshire, never thrown on a radar gun. For the most part, really never played like high-level baseball or competition. I get invited to this tryout. There's about 65 pro scouts and college scouts behind home plate, all with radar guns. And they're calling out the velocities. And so I've never thrown on a gun. And I'm like, I want to know how hard I throw. I think I throw pretty hard. And I'm warming up, trying to throw the crap out of the ball. Get out there, first fastball, 83. And I'm like, all right, well, that's not it. A lot of the kids were throwing 88. So I'm like, all right, gotta see what I got. Sure enough, I end up ticking up every few pitches, get up to 88, 89. I finish, I handshake with a couple scouts. They're like, hey man, you're gonna have some phone calls after this. I had no idea what they were talking about. Part of me thought I was gonna make the team. Definitely wasn't good enough to make the team. But by the time I got back to New Hampshire, about an hour and a half home from Bentley College, I'd had about 6 to 10 phone calls from local Division I schools wanting me to come visit and discuss things about potentially playing for their teams. And like I kind of said before, at that time I was really leaning towards trying to play football in college. So it was kind of this light bulb moment where I was like, okay, I don't really have to destroy my body and tackle people anymore, and I can do pitching at the next level, which is something I loved. I just loved striking guys out. But up to that point, I didn't really like train to pitch. All I did was maybe throw a bullpen once a week from like February on to get ready for a high school season. I didn't lift weights. I had no idea how to throw anything other than like the fastball and curveball I had taught myself. Didn't throw a changeup. And kind of flash forward a little bit, the recruiting process went on for about 7 to 10 weeks and eventually settled on a 58% scholarship to the University of Connecticut. So came down to deciding for me between Northeastern and UConn. And ultimately, at the time, I thought those were the two best programs in the Northeast, especially for pitchers. And so kind of the biggest thing I want to drive home today is that like we don't see that happen anymore timeline-wise. So I was 17 years old. I was going into my senior year of high school, and I committed to a Division I program with a scholarship as a right-handed pitcher, which like right now is just not happening, right? We see it with tons of kids that we coach in the gym. You can see it with just rosters of colleges. If you go and look up the rosters for these Division I programs, a lot of these guys are coming in from different schools, right? Or they are, they're just coming in from different schools, whether that's a JUCO, that's a D3 school, a D2 school, or another D1 school. So a couple things that have gone on since COVID and since the pandemic has been that athletes can just transfer now one time and they don't have to sit out, nothing like that. So essentially, transfer is kind of like free agency. And I think we see a lot of these kids that are getting scholarships to go play at Division I schools. These kids are being offered these opportunities at 15 years old, maybe 16 years old. But after that, the scholarships to go to a Division I program are pretty slim pickings, unless you happen to be very outlier for your class or your age, or you kind of come onto the map really late, go through puberty really late, but you have to make pretty substantial jumps in order to catch the attention of someone at a Division I school out of high school right now. It just is what it is. And then take into the same consideration that we're here in the Northeast, where we're limited to how often we can play over the course of the year. Like, I don't think it's good for any like amateur baseball player to play baseball year round. It's a really easy way to get to burnout. It's a really easy way to kind of lose focus on training and lose focus on your performance. But kids are trying to go to these showcases, these events all over the country, essentially all year, with the hopes of getting recruited. But in reality, like, you're not going to get recruited unless you're just really, really, really good. And that's like something that can be hard for guys to swallow right now, but that's just the reality of where we live. Like, you look at these schools, they are taking multiple grad transfers, so guys who have graduated from their Division I schools who still have multiple years of eligibility left, and they're going to a school like UConn, they're going to a school like Northeastern after being the ace at the college they were at for 3 or 4 years. Those are the athletes that are getting recruited by these competitive Power 5 and top 25 Division I programs. So kind of moral of the story is like, it's just more competitive landscape right now. Like, if you want a scholarship, you have to be better early. If you want to be better early, the best way to do that is to be more physically developed than your peers. Now, puberty is going to play a huge role in that. But if you can kind of get started early with training and build a solid foundation between the ages of like 13 and 15, then when puberty does start to kick in, your gains and your performance is going to go way up relative to your peers who haven't built that training base. So I think that's, in essence, like the mission of our business and why we do what we do is we want kids to have a foundation so that when their body starts to physically develop, they can take off. And then coaching them from a skill standpoint or mechanical standpoint at that point is much easier for myself, because I know that athlete has a strong base, they're stable in end ranges, they can get into a multitude of positions from mobility-based training, and then they just generally know how to respond and recover, versus an athlete who starts trying to strength train at 16 or 17 years old while they're also trying to get ready for the season and throwing, are going to find themselves just sore all the time, and it's really hard for them to buy into that consistent training. They want to feel good when they throw or when they swing, so then they stop the training, but then they literally lack the engine that they need to go out there and throw hard enough or hit hard enough. So I know that was like a long rant, but for what it's worth, I think that's like what a ton of athletes need to hear. It's what we drive home in the gym, and it's something that I would love for like people to poke holes in, because it's for the most part just what we see. We've seen 40 kids in the last 2 years go on to play in college, anywhere from top 25 programs to local competitive Division III programs. And no matter whether it's Division I, II, or III, it's still extremely competitive landscape. And if you can't comprehend that and you can't start doing the right things right now, then your goals are just going to be goals. They're not going to be things you accomplish. There's a few things about my experience that I wanted to go into a little bit more detail with and kind of give you some more insight as to like my career, things I went through, struggles I faced, right? So like I mentioned earlier, I went to a Division I school with a scholarship. I was drafted twice, but it wasn't that simple and it wasn't that easy, right? I was recruited because I was projectable. I could showcase potential high velocities, but I could also throw 82. So it wasn't like I was just stock ripping 88 with a banger. I was anywhere from 82 to 88. And it kind of depended on how well I felt that day, because I was 6'5", 172 pounds, and I had no strength. I had really no idea how to recover. So I get to campus, freshman fall, and we have scout day, first bullpen, right, basically, and I'm like, oh, let's go, gotta hit 90, blah, blah, blah. Go out there, I like top out at like 87, 88. Meanwhile, we got like Matt Barnes and guys who just played on Team USA in the summer who throw 98, and I'm like, how am I gonna pitch here, right? And then flash forward, I end up redshirting because I had no idea how to handle a bunt defense situation. I had no idea how to keep a runner on first base and keep them from stealing on me every single time. These were just things I didn't learn and didn't have to do in high school baseball in New Hampshire. I also had no idea how to handle my time. Time management was something that like I had to learn. And so managing going to class for 16 hours a week, managing going to practice for 20-something hours a week, managing working out 4 times a week, and then trying to sleep, all while I'm living on my own for the first time, was very difficult. It took me probably 3 or 4 months to make that adjustment. And by then the season had started and I basically wasn't on the team because I was redshirting. So I was watching my good friends go play baseball games on the weekend against other schools, and all I wanted to do was help them try to win. And all I could do was focus on myself to get better at school. So I spent my entire freshman year trying to gain weight and strength, learn a little bit more about how to throw some better off-speed pitches, and then learn like the nuances of being a pitcher. And flash forward, I ended up playing in the NECBL that summer. Was able to throw like 91, 92, command the zone pretty well. Had a decent summer, came back to school in the fall, had a decent fall. Was told I'd hopefully be like a back end of the pen guy going into the spring. We go into the spring, which is my redshirt freshman year, so my second year at UConn. And I really hadn't pitched much through the first like month and a half of the year. And quite frankly, was getting very frustrated about that. It was like talking to my parents about wanting to transfer, talking to my parents about, you know, I've been here, I've put in all this work, I've made so many strides as a player, and I'm still not playing. And like, that was really, really hard for me. And one thing Gary just talked about was finding the right fit. Finding the right fit where you're gonna get experience right away. Because if that's what you need, if you need in-game experience or you wanna go out there and compete, you probably shouldn't be looking at a school where you're gonna be on the bench for 2 years. Because your love for the game is gonna go away. Your love for trying to get better is gonna be challenged day in and day out. I was thankful for my father, right? We had a lot of heart-to-heart discussions about just like, you've put in this much work and you're this close. If you step away and give up now, you're gonna regret it. So I made the pact with him that I would stick out that spring, and sure enough, about 2 or 3 weeks later, we had a couple guys go down with injuries, and I got my first chance in an early game when the starter came out, and I ended up pitching like 4 or 5 innings, and sure enough, a couple weeks later, I found myself in a starting role, and I was never gonna give it up after that, because it took me 2 years to just taste playing on the field consistently, which, like Gary mentioned and kind of hinted at earlier, that's like not something colleges are doing right now. They aren't recruiting kids that are projectable 17-year-olds, right? They are recruiting kids that are 16 that can help them win essentially right away from being on campus day one. Because if that 16-year-old doesn't project to help them win on day one, somebody from the portal will. Somebody who wants to go there, who's older, who has experience in all of those things is ready to do that. And I think that that's something that's like super valuable for you guys to hear, is that schools aren't betting on you to show up and get better and then them turn you into a really good player on the field. You need to take responsibility now so that when you get to school, they can use you to help win games right away. Because at the end of the day, that's the goal, right? That's what a college coach is doing when he recruits you. They need to get 35 players that are going to ultimately help them win the most games that spring. Because the more games they win, the better it is for their school, the better it is for their family, and the better it is for the rest of the coaching staff. And that's what it is. It's a business. And a lot of it with my dad and the conversations we had were about that, about how my job as a student athlete was to go help them win games. Not to be the best at training, not to be the best at team lifts, not to be the best practice player. What mattered was when we stepped in conference play, when we stepped in Big East tournament, could I help them win the tournament? Because if I could, I was going to be a value add, I was going to travel, I was going to play. It took me a while to stomach that. And once I did, and once I comprehended that, no one was going to take it from me because I knew how precious the opportunity was. I knew how precious my role was. The minute I got to pitch on Friday night for the first time was like just surge of adrenaline, right? I get goosebumps thinking about it right now because I knew that it took me like 500 days of my life of working very hard with the same goal to get there. And I think that's another thing that kids like just miss right now with social media and TikTok, and these things are just so quick and all in front of you all the time. That's not real. Real is showing up to work hard every single day, right? One of the most common things we see is just kids who come to us and they say, I can't gain weight, I can't gain weight, I can't gain weight. Well, do you really want to gain weight? Do you understand how hard it is to gain weight? Do you understand that it's an everyday waking moment thing? Not something you can do on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right? It's something you need to do 5 times a day, every single day, for about 2 years. And if you can do that, you can make tremendous progress, right? So use myself as an example. I am a pretty frail human being, okay? I am tall and skinny. I weigh 182 pounds right now. When I played competitive baseball, I weighed 215 pounds. That's 35 more pounds than I weigh right now. Right now, I probably eat on average, we're getting into the weeds too much, but right now I probably eat about 3,000 calories a day, maybe a little bit more. If I wanted to weigh my playing weight, I'd have to eat somewhere between like 5,000 and 6,000 calories every single day, minimum. That's eating 5 1,000 calorie meals. That is very hard to do, right? That was a decision that I had to make. It was something I had to realize. Like I was 168 pounds as a junior in high school, and when I stepped on campus as a freshman in college, I was 190 pounds. And by the time I stepped on campus as a sophomore, I was 205 pounds. So that's like a 2.5, 3-year window of me gaining weight and strength that I needed just to be a competitive player at Division I level, to then become a competitive professional player. And so I think everyone sees these like quick changes, these things on social media that make it look like you can just make massive strides over 1 to 2 months, and it's just not possible. It's just not a thing, right? It takes 6 months, a year, stuff like that. You do that and you do the things the right way, you can make those strides, right? We have multiple athletes that are between 8th grade and their junior year in high school right now who committed to the weight room over the last year. They committed to strength training 3 to 4 times a week, committed to sleeping properly, right? Not sleeping from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. and getting up to go to school, right? These guys are going to bed at 9:30, 9 p.m. All your friends are up playing video games. They're going to bed, right? And then they're waking up at 6, they're making breakfast for 30 minutes. They're eating 750 calorie breakfast before they go to school. They're eating again at 10 a.m. They're eating at lunch. They're eating again at 2 p.m. before they come to the facility. They eat while they're at the facility, and then they eat when they get home. And then after dinner, they eat again, right? These are commitments that you don't see on social media. These are things that are real, right? And yes, you could have the perfect throwing program. You could have the best pitching coach in all of baseball. I don't care who that is. If you're not doing these other things, you're just not going to accomplish what you want to accomplish. And if you do, well, you're the outlier. And if you guys aren't an outlier, if you can't go, right, and just beat all of your peers at something, whether that's like a vertical jump, an arm wrestle, a bench press, a sprint, whatever it is, if you're not in the elite of elite athleticism, then just hoping that these mechanical changes are going to make you that much better, it's just not going to happen. And I think a lot of people are afraid to say these things because they're afraid to tell you that it's hard work, right? It's not an easy sell. It's a hard sell. A lot of kids come to the gym and they want to get better, and after 3 months they realize that they're not really interested in strength training. They're not really interested in getting good night's sleep. They're not really interested in eating properly. well, it's probably not for you then. And that's something we have to tell people. It's just, you might not be a perfect fit for what's going on here. Because what's going on here is organic, right? It's a lot of hard work. It is a ton of accountability. And for what it's worth, if you try to show up and go through the motions, other players at the gym are going to call you out. Coaches are going to call you out. Not because we want to make you feel bad. It's because when you come in for your initial assessment and we sit down with you and we go through these goals, and you tell us you want to play Division I baseball, you tell us you want to gain 20 pounds, you tell us you want to throw 10 miles an hour harder, we're going to be blunt with you, because if you're not doing the things that you need to do to make those happen, they're just not going to happen. So if someone can promise you something's going to happen quickly, if they're going to promise you that a few different drills are going to make you better, it's just not true. And that's why we're sitting here today going through kind of these talks, and why we're going to continue to go through these talks, because there's no magic pills. It's just, that's the bottom line. The only magic pill out there might be the fact that, like, you're an elite athlete, you can already throw a baseball very hard or swing a bat very fast, and your skills are just slightly off. That's where we can make quick changes. But if you can't do those things and you're anticipating to gain a lot of velocity or gain a lot of exit velo, probably not going to happen. Power 5 schools in the fall, essentially you're trying out for the team. So, like, if you roll into an SEC practice or a Big 10 practice or a Big 12 practice in the fall, there's probably 60 bodies on the field. If you know roster limitations in Division I baseball, there's 35 players you can have on your roster come February. There's 25 guys who can play on a weekend. So if 60 guys are there in the fall, what's happening to make it roster at 35 players? Well, those people are being told that they need to transfer, that they need to find a different school to go to, that they're not going to be a member of that team that spring. So if you go to, let's say, just to use the name, Coastal Carolina, and you don't make the team in the fall, well, you're probably going to look to, in the past, you looked to go to a JUCO relatively close to that area, so you could ideally try to get to another Division I school. But now with the portal, you can go anywhere. There's a one-time thing, you can go anywhere. So kids that are very, very good are taking risks on themselves to try to make a team at a Power 5 school. And then they're essentially bouncing back to mid-majors. So if you're in that mid-major competitive recruiting landscape, it's another thing you're competing against. It's another thing people don't understand. I went to UConn with 10 incoming freshmen. 6 of us were left after my junior year, and then after my senior year, 4. That speaks volumes, right? Not to the fact that, like, UConn's cutting players, to the fact that after being there for 2 years and they hadn't earned time on the field, they wanted to go somewhere they could play. They wanted to go somewhere where they felt like they could still be a baseball player. They didn't want 10 at-bats. They didn't want 10 innings, right? They wanted to play. And so I think that's another thing, is just like understanding that every single day you're at a school, you're competing to be there. You're competing for that job. As soon as you stop doing that, you're losing what you had. Yep. And it's something we stress to kids all the time. Like, yeah, sick, you commit to a Power 5 school as a sophomore in high school, awesome, very good for you. Super happy for you and your family. But now my job, our job, is to make sure that when you step foot on campus, you are ready to be a value add to that program. You're ready to strength train 4 days a week. You're ready to go to study hall for 15 hours a week. You're ready to go to class, right, for 6 hours a day, depending on the day. Not to mention practice, not to mention social life, not to mention doing your laundry, eating, right, new friends, not around your parents, a lot of these things. But our job is to make sure that you are ready when you get there. And that's another thing that we really pride ourselves on, is we've had a handful of kids go to some very, very good schools in the last 3 to 4 years. And our goal, our job, is to essentially continue to be their life coach, performance coach, strength coach, pitching coach, whatever that athlete needs. So if you're watching this and you're at a college and you're like, hey, I just got a lot of questions and I want answers, well, ask us, right? That's why we're here. We're here to continue to fill you in with what we know. We're here to help you. We're here to remote program for you. We're here to essentially be what we wish we had when we were your age. So if you feel lost and you're not sure about what to do, send us a message, send us an email. We can help you, right? But if you're not ready to put in the work, if you're not really ready to look in the mirror, and you're not really ready to accept reality, then it's probably not for you. But if you're ready to do those things, we're here and we're welcome.